Good news is we have someone with us who can play that projection game far better than we can because she spent the time studying it. I know she was at the draft combine in Chicago. She's been writing about it all year long for Yahoo Sports. It's our pleasure to welcome Krysten Peek to the show. Krysten, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate your time. And how are you doing? What are we, 26 hours, 27 hours from the draft?
Yeah, I mean, tomorrow is a combination of Christmas Day and graduation for me. Just covering these players and being in the gym with them from the time that they're 15 to now. It's the best time of year. I know there aren't a lot of people that are super stoked about this draft class, but I do think that there is going to be some value and some long-term players. And like every other year past, there is going to be a guy. We just don't know where it is yet.
Yeah, totally. As I've been saying for a month to our audience, like the 2013 draft's the worst ever unless you were the Milwaukee Bucks, and it's the best draft you've ever had, and at least since you drafted Kareem back in the day. When you look at this draft, the top and the Hawks are so interesting. One, because we're still not 100% sure what they're going to do yet. And also there's potential for moves. You know, you have the DeJounte Murray and Trae Young situations, Clint Capella. It feels like everything is on the table for the Hawks. As we sit here, whatever the number is, 27 hours from the draft, what's the latest you're hearing and what you expect the Hawks to do when they get on the clock tomorrow night?
I don't think the Hawks are willing to give up, or vice versa, what the Spurs are willing to give up in future picks for what the Hawks want. For the Spurs, I think they're the only team that would be interested in moving up to get Zachary Richeche. But also with that is they would have to give up some future first-round picks that they actually acquired in the DeJounte Murray trade, which is kind of ironic. But when you're looking at next year's draft class and the year after, next year with Cooper Flagg and Ace Bailey, I don't think that the Spurs are going to be willing to give that up, just with how meticulous they're being in this rebuild process, kind of building around Wemby. So I do ultimately think that they do take the pick, and I do think they're heavily considering Richeche, just with his upside at the wing position and just, you know, how much he's shown improvement over the course of his season over in France, playing for JL Borg in the LNB Pro A League. And also Donovan Clinton. I think at 7'2", he was the anchor in the defense for a UConn team that won back-to-back titles. And he has the long-term potential to be a very productive starting NBA center.
The Richeche argument is so interesting to me because if you tell a team, hey, in the first round, you're going to get a guy who at the worst is a really excellent 3-and-D player. Most teams are psyched. But at the first pick in the draft, to get a guy who might not have any playmaking ability is like a gigantic gulp type of situation. What is the projection that you have, having watched him play, watched him grow, reading interviews, talking to people around the scouting world about what his ceiling is as someone who has just not had the ball in his hands as much as we typically see for a top 2 or 3 pick, nevertheless the first pick overall?
I think why people say that, oh, he doesn't have playmaking ability, is just because the way that players develop in Europe, in France, is significantly different than what we're used to seeing here in the States. We're seeing more ISO ball. That's why you see the shot creation at a higher rate with these college players and American players. Over in Europe, they are first taught team basketball. And I know this is going to sound childish, but it's more of make the extra pass, catch and shoot, be a catch and shoot shooter. You don't have to be the ISO player. So I think his shot creation will come. I'd much rather have a player that is a dynamic passer at 6'9", has defensive versatility, and is an excellent three-point shooter with the upside of becoming a shot creator than the opposite, right? So that's why I value Richeche at the wing position. And just look Bilal Coulibaly, teammate with Victor Wembanyama last year, averaged maybe 5 points per game, was a lottery pick, and coming into his sophomore year, I don't know if you've seen the videos or the photos, but it looks like he's added 20 pounds of muscle mass, and he's, I think, going to have a breakout year. So anytime you see the projection of these French players and this Wemby wave is what I've called it, I think the upside kind of outweighs, the ceiling or the floor of what you're seeing at 18 or 19 years old.
Krysten Peek, NBA draft writer for Yahoo Sports, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Yeah, it went. I mean, all you have to do, especially here in DC, is go, yeah, remember Bilal? And it's like, oh yeah, nope, that's right. Because we saw more than we thought, and frankly, more than we were told that we would see from Bilal. The other guy that I think at this point is being universally mocked to Washington at 2, assuming that Risa Shea goes 1 to Atlanta, is Alex Sarr. His upbringing is a little bit different because he spent time in the States, spent time in Australia. How does he fit in kind of along those same lines, question-wise, of what his upside is and coming out of the French system, but also kind of not really?
Yeah, with Alex, I mean, I think when we're looking at the development and the way that the center position is becoming more of a hybrid role, you look at Minnesota, they played 3 guys at one point that are 7 foot plus. You, of course, have in the Western Conference, you've got Chet Holmgren and also Victor Wembanyama. And then I think Paolo Banchero, you can even throw him there as like a positionalist big in the NBA. So the value of having Alex Sarr at 7'1" and his already skill set, elite rim protector, great footwork, good hands. He has the potential of a pick and pop game to kind of grow in that sort of regards. I think that's what makes him more valuable than Donovan Clinton or any of the other centers that are projected to go in the first round. And with Alex, I mean, he's said already that, or maybe he hasn't, his people have said that he wants to be more of that hybrid 4-5 and not day in, night out being tasked to guard, some of the bigger bodied centers in the NBA.
When you look at Washington, is Sarr the guy that you like? If I'm putting everyone on the board. So Risa Shea's back on. Sarr is on. Guys like Steph Castle, who are number 1 on a lot of boards. Whoever else you want to throw in. Who's the guy you would want to be available to you if you're Will Dawkins on the clock at 2 for Washington?
I think either Alex Sarr or Donovan Clinton. I mean, I didn't watch every game of the Washington Wizards, but
God bless you, Krysten, because I watched enough for anybody last year, and I think Will still owes me many apologies.
And the thing is like if you want that center that's going to anchor your defense, then Donovan Clinton is going to be the better match. But if you want that positionalist kind of hybrid role, then Alex Sarr. So at 2, I'm taking a 7 foot plus whatever because they don't come around. I mean, yeah, they do come around every year, but in terms of the skill set and just the floor of those 2 guys and what you're getting from a 19, 20-year-old screams upside. Of course, I love Steph Castle. I just don't think it's a right fit. Of course, I love Reed Shepherd, but I think they're going to be more in that Houston and Spurs talk.
Shepherd to me is a fascinating piece. I know the fit. Everyone's drawing it to San Antonio because Shepherd, it appears, will have some defensive challenges in the NBA, and those challenges can be covered for and wiped away by Victor Wembanyama's presence. And you just can't teach people to shoot like Reed Shepherd. What do you think Shepherd's ceiling is? But also, if he doesn't go to 1 or 2 places that are, maybe up towards that ceiling, how far could he fall?
I don't think, if he falls, he's not falling past 6. I can tell you that to Charlotte. But, with Reed Shepherd, I think everyone is just like very focused on his 3-point shooting, as they should be. He's a great shooter. He can do it in the catch and shoot. He can do it off the dribble, transition threes, off the PNR. Great high IQ player. But I think what we're forgetting is he's also 6'2", and so the shots that he was able to get off, and the blocks that he was able to have at Kentucky in the secondary unit, he's not going to have them at the same rate in the NBA. He's 6'2" with a 6'3" wingspan, and so as much as I love Reed Shepherd, I don't see his upside being as great as some of the other guards projected as the top, like Steph Castle. I think could really have a long-term career or long time in the NBA being a starting NBA guard just with his size at 6'5", 6'6". Those inches help a lot. What he does defensively and the fact that his shot is coming around.
One thing that I think is so interesting about this draft, Krysten, is Krysten Peek from Yahoo Sports is our guest, is it like because people generally think it's not very good, and there are a few teams that are in weird places in their organizational rebuild. Houston at 3 is one of them. They have no business being a top 5 team, but they have that Nets pick. All of a sudden, because the Nets can never catch any luck on these types of things, they win the lottery in a year. They have to give their pick away in return for the James Harden deal. So there's talk that maybe they want to get out and trade that pick for a veteran player. San Antonio's in a very interesting spot as they hold the 4th and 8th picks. Of course, all this, just recapping and setting up the question for the audience here. But if you're a team like the Wizards, and Will Dawkins has said, like, I like this draft better than a lot of other people. There's talent to be had. Like, would you consider trading like a Kyle Kuzma to Houston for number 3? Like, what kind of opportunities are there, I guess, is really the question for Washington, or is it just not worth it? And really the goal is looking a year or 2 down the line, especially with the long-term vision the Wizards have, knowing how good these drafts are the next 2 years.
It's definitely not worth it to throw someone in, like Kyle Kuzma into trade talks with this draft. Definitely not. Next year, maybe, just with the bigger upside and star potential that we have across the board. I'm talking 1 probably through 6 in next year's draft. So if Washington can just be patient with the rebuild, hope that they have a swing and a hit with either Clinton or with Sarr, adding to the pieces, getting Bilal back for his sophomore season, I think there could be something really good growing. But to entertain trades, to trade down in this draft for whatever pieces you want, you have to remember there is going to be, yes, I know there is going to be a guy, but the uncertainty in not knowing it would just make me want to take best available prospect at the top. And also, if that prospect isn't what you need for a team fit, then team fit. And I think Sarr and Klingon are the 2 guys that they're kind of hoping to see there at 2.
Which, just to underscore this, like the idea that you would say, oh yeah, if I'm going to wind up trading Kuzma for a first rounder, which is, of course, they would love to get 2. I don't know whether they're going to get 2, but you could have the number 3 pick guaranteed, or some pick in next year's draft. The idea that you're like, do not give me the number 3 pick. I want some pick next year. Like, I guess that better as much as anything else would underscore how much of at the very nicest, a crapshoot this draft is, nevertheless, how bad it is.
Listen, there's a reason why there was a buzz and way more executives and scouts at the Nike Hoop Summit this year, right after the Final Four. And that's because they wanted to get eyes in person, these decision makers, these GMs, eyes on the players that are coming up next year. And they did not disappoint. The top players played very well. I know Nolan Traore, the French point guard, VJ Edgecombe said he's the best point guard I've ever played with in my life. So you have a top guard also commenting another guard saying he's the best one I've ever played with. Like, that is exciting for any NBA GM to hear, especially if you're looking for like that franchise-changing guard to come in and change the tide.
Last thing for Krysten Peek here, staff writer, NBA draft writer at Yahoo Sports, with us here on the Hoffman Show. The Wizards also have a pick at the end of the first round. Is there somebody in the end of the first round? I know, it could be one of like 40 players, because everyone's boards, especially in this year's draft, are crazy. You have guys that could go 15 or could go 50. But is there anybody in that late 20s range that you really, really like, that you think has huge upside, that would kind of fit the mold of positional size and upside that Washington seems to be looking for?
I mean, if you take a big at 2, I think Johnny Furphy, the Australian shooter who played 1 year at Kansas, would be a good option. Is he a finished product? No, but I think the fact that he turned down a lucrative NIL deal to return to Kansas means that he walked away from the combine with a promise, and I think that promise is somewhere in the back half of the first round. I think he's about 1 or 2 years away from really being a guy that pops offensively, but he has a really smooth stroke. Like, he can shoot the living you-know-what out of the ball. So I think there's going to be one of those things where it's like, okay, we're going to take him now because he would have been a lottery pick next year. And if you're looking for that positional size, I know a fan favorite right now around the draft community is Deron Holmes, who, played at Dayton, has that 6'10", 6'11" frame. More of a promising pick and pop. He shot nearly 40% from 3 out of Dayton. And so, you look at a team like the Celtics who just won playing 5-man out. When you're looking at that size, you want to be able to plug and play a guy on the perimeter and not be a liability defensively.
Krysten Peek, NBA draft writer for Yahoo Sports. Krysten, enjoy tomorrow. Should be a wild, wild day and night of, we'll see about the trades, but certainly of picks because we just don't know. But great work in the lead up and reading a lot of your stuff and really appreciate your time here on the radio.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.